I want to tell you something that took me a long time to see. Not because it's hidden, because most people encounter it in the middle of what feels like a collapse and spend years trying to fix the collapse rather than understand it. At some point around 29, something shifts. The relationship you thought would last starts to feel like a wrong-sized coat. The career you worked for suddenly feels borrowed. The version of yourself you'd been performing since you were 17 stops fitting. Most people call this a crisis. I've come to think of it differently. Here's what I mean. The human prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that constructs your sense of who you are, doesn't finish developing until somewhere between 25 and 30. Think about that for a moment. Every identity you built before 25, every belief about what you deserve, what's possible for you, what kind of person you are, was assembled by a brain that hadn't finished yet. It wasn't wrong, it was just incomplete. A first draft. Around 29, the brain does something called synaptic pruning. It begins eliminating neural connections that are no longer being used. Pathways that were laid down in childhood, the ones wired by fear, by approval, by survival, start to thin out if you're not actively reinforcing them. The brain is making room for something more accurate. Now, astrologers have tracked a different cycle for over 3,000 years. Every 29.4 years, Saturn completes its orbit and returns to the exact position it held when you were born. They called it the Saturn return. And across centuries, across cultures, they observed the same thing. At this moment, things that no longer belong to you tend to leave. Relationships, careers, identities, beliefs. Not because the universe is punishing you, because Saturn, in the symbolic language of every ancient system that used it, is the principle of structure. And structure, by definition, removes what doesn't hold. I find it interesting, and I don't think it's coincidence, that the planetary cycle and the neuroscience land in the same window, 27 to 31, both pointing at the same event. The architecture of your identity is being revised. There's a filter in your brain called the reticular activating system. It processes roughly 11 million bits of information per second. You consciously perceive around 40. 40 out of 11 million. What determines which 40? Your identity. The stories your nervous system holds about who you are. Those stories decide what your brain even allows you to see. This is why changing your identity isn't just psychological. It's perceptual. You don't just feel different, you literally observe a different reality. Which brings me to why the Saturn return matters beyond the pain of it. It's not an obstacle, it's an opening. The pruning that's happening in your brain, the collapsing of what no longer fits, creates space for a new configuration, a new identity, which means a new filter, which means a new reality, not as metaphor, but as neurobiology. The question isn't whether this will happen. It already is. The question is whether you'll be conscious during it. Most people aren't. They spend 3 years rebuilding the exact same structure, same patterns, same ceiling, same walls. just with a different address. The second Saturn return comes around 58, the third at 87. Each one is another compression, another invitation to release what the structure no longer supports. The pattern is consistent. I'm not telling you this so that you feel better about what's breaking. I'm telling you this so you understand what's actually happening, because there's a difference between surviving a collapse and using one.